Okay, so in this video we're going to learn how to layer up our quilt for the Learn to Quilt class. What I've done here is I've taken my backing and I've taped it to a table. I've actually had to put two tables together here. You can use a dining room table, or sometimes I've been known to tape it to the floor. But just some surface that's, you know, good and hard that you can tape your backing to. I just have a standard width fabric here. It happens to be one of the same ones that's in the front of the quilt, but it can be anything. Raid the sale shelves if you're just looking for a good cheap backing, or muslin is also a good backing option. So the thing to remember is it has to be taped down so that it's good and flat, and you want it to be wrong side up. Okay, so that's our first layer of our quilt sandwich. Now, the backing and the batting are a little bit bigger than what I need, so what I'm going to do when I put the batting on top of that, I'm just going to line it up on two sides, essentially. So I'm going to line it up with this side and not really worry about the other sides, because they're much larger than what I need, so I can trim them later. But I'm going to line up two corners. And you can see here what I've done is I've actually zigzagged two pieces of batting together, because you can always use your offcuts of batting. And then once we've got it on top of the quilt top, we want to just smooth out any bubbles. So if you just work your way out from the center, just smooth out any bubbles so everything's good and flat. And because you've taped down your backing fabric, you shouldn't have to worry about that moving while you're doing this. Okay, so that's all smooth. Then we're going to take the quilt top. Again, I'm going to kind of work from these same two corners where I lined up my batting with the backing, but I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. I want to give myself about sort of at least 1, and if you can, 2 inches. Because as you quilt, things kind of shrink in a little bit, so it's good to have a little bit of excess batting and backing all the way around your quilt top. And again, once I've got it roughly where I want it, I just smooth everything out to get it flat. If you don't have two tables that you can stick side by side, and you have to do this on one table, then what you'll have to do is just have most of your quilt on the table, just let gravity hold the rest of it down over the edge. And then after you've sort of got one section of it pinned, you can move it and you can pin the other section. But I always find it easiest if I can get it all flat to pin, I will. Okay, so that's all smoothed out now. We're ready to pin. So we're just using safety pins. Quilter safety pins have a little bit of a curve in them, but you can also use just straight safety pins. I have quite a collection of different sizes here, but chances are you'll start off, they'll all be the same size, and then maybe one day you'll be like me and you'll just have an eclectic collection of pins. So when we safety pin baste, we want to have our pins probably roughly 3 to 4 inches apart, no more than that, because the more you pin, the less likely you are to have puckers and that sort of thing. So I'm going to start kind of roughly in the middle of the quilt and work my way out. When I put my pins in, I do not close them. I just put the pins in, and you kind of want to feel them. Essentially, you kind of want to feel the table, right, as you go all the way through, so that you know that you're going through all your layers. I do, if at all possible, I kind of try to avoid putting pins over seams, because we're going to be doing stitch in the ditch quilting, which is going to be on the seams. But sometimes you need to go over a seam, and it really doesn't matter that much, because as you come up to a pin and it's in your way, because it's a safety pin, you just remove it. Go put this one here. So I'm sort of roughly kind of working my way out from the center in each direction. And then we'll just kind of do sort of a grid-ish. So I'll do this side first. Another one in here. And the reason that we aren't going to close the pins is every time you need to close a safety pin, the chances of you needing to pull up a little bit as you close the pin is going to introduce a bubble. So we're going to put all the pins in first, leaving them open. Then once all the safety pins are in, we're going to close them all up at the end. I'll do this way out. And then we will stop the video and I'll show you what it looks like after it's all done. Okay, so I'm now at the stage here with my layering up where I have all my safety pins in here. And you see I've kind of done a grid, but you know, this isn't a very regular quilt because of the, you know, it's a sampler. So, you know, there'll be some places where, you know, maybe you don't follow exactly a straight line grid, but you know, as long as your pins are roughly every sort of 3 to 4 inches, that's plenty of pins. You might have more in some areas than others, and that's fine. So these have all been pinned and we haven't closed them up yet. What we want to do before we close it up, so we just want to I've started taking some of the tape here off of my backing, and we don't need this anymore because essentially the quilt is basted, right? It's basted, even though we haven't closed the pins, it is all held together. Before we go closing our pins, we just want to flip our quilt over, just to make sure we didn't accidentally have a fold or something underneath, some nasty surprise, you know? So we just want to make sure that everything looks like it's flat and that our pins look like they're all going through all the layers. So I always like to just flip it over and check. It's better to find out now if there's a problem on the back than to find out after you've closed up all your pins. So we'll give that a quick check. And then now we're ready to actually start closing up our pins. Doesn't really matter where we start. We just basically go through and take every single one of these pins and just go ahead and close them now. So we could just go through and just find every single one and start closing them. And then once they are all closed, then we're done with our basting. See the dogs, dear. All right.
You got that, boys?
Nobody wants to see you, boys. Okay, so here's the quilt. It's all pin basted now. You can see all of my pins. I've closed them all. And if we look along these two edges, these were the two edges that I sort of lined up with the batting and the backing, so that I have sort of like a 2-ish, you know, 1 to 2 inch sort of extra of your batting and your backing. You see these other two sides I have much more than that, and what I can do now is I can actually trim this. You don't have to, it's not that, you know, not that much extra, so you don't have to trim it. This edge, I actually took the end of the bolt, so I ended up with about 1/3 of a yard instead of 1 1/4, so I have quite a bit extra, so I will probably just go ahead and trim this edge off, because the smaller the quilt is, the easier it is to get through your sewing machine. So that's it. That is my quilt all ready to start my stitching in the ditch quilting.